This is Sporting Life.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Sporting Life racing podcast. We have assembled a fantastic panel to discuss last weekend's Irish Derby card at the Curragh and Newcastle as well. And we're going to look ahead to what looks a tremendous renewal of the Coral-Eclipse at Sandown. I'm Ben Linfoot. I'm joined by Matt Brocklebank from Sporting Life, Billy Nash from Timeform, Graham Cunningham, as always, and Fran Berry as well. So Noah Chamberlain this week, he's in a dark room after last week's 15-minute rant that opened the podcast. So we're going to avoid that this week and get straight into the Dubai duty-free Irish Derby.
It's a good job they got commercial breaks on ITV, or he'd never get a breather, would he?
Exactly. You were there at the Curragh GC. Los Angeles won the race for Aidan O'Brien, a 16th Irish Derby win. What was your immediate reaction?
Morning all. Yeah, I was at the Curragh. First person I met was Fran Berry. Took me for a coffee. I said, thanks, Fran, the manager of the little cafe there, lovely little cafe there, on the house for you, Fran. So Fran Berry doesn't have to pay for his coffees when he goes racing in Ireland. So thanks, Fran. I enjoyed it. I thought it was, I wasn't there all weekend this time. I thought the Derby was a really, solid, strong, tough race in more ways than one. And of course, Los Angeles came out on top. Lots of points of interest on the undercard. Not sure we saw another City of Troy, but we'll come to one or two performances. I think from the 2-year-olds, there was one filly who got beaten on Friday night who really caught my eye.
Billy, you are looking bronzed after going to Valencia on holiday. Welcome back. I take it you were back to see the Irish Derby.
Ben, how come you don't look bronzed? Because you've been away as well for a few relaxed days in Benidorm, haven't you?
Unfortunately, I was in the shadows, JC.
What's your quick review of Benidorm?
Good time.
One word review.
Good time, bad place. it's my assessment.
Righto.
But Billy, yeah, you must have seen the Irish Derby.
I did see the Irish Derby scoop, yeah. I'd agree with GC. It was quite a tough race. I don't think it was a spectacular one. I don't think we had a spectacular winner. The ratings would back that up. Los Angeles up to a Timeform mark of 120p. He's a very solid campaigner. I think there's probably more to come from him. He's a big unit, and you'd imagine he'd get better, maybe even better as a 4-year-old than a 3-year-old. Whether he'll go 1 6 or not, Aidan was talking about this in Ledger afterward. They might go down that route with him. But I think there is more to come from him. The fact that they all finished up in a heap behind him, Ambiente Friendly, Sunway and Matsuri, we couldn't take a very positive view of the form, but certainly there was positives to take from those individual performances. I thought Matsuri in particular enhanced his rating quite a bit and his reputation. Probably unlucky not to be placed on the day. I don't think he'd have won, but I'm sure we'll get onto that in more detail later on. But yeah, a good race, I thought, all around, Ben.
And Fran, from a jockey's point of view, it was tactics executed by Team Ballydoyle again, but it wasn't a particularly rough race, was it?
No, I suppose the unexpected move, the home straight bend, whatever went wrong with the Curragh this weekend, was riding particularly sharp as well. Yeah. They had a rough week on the personnel front at the Curragh, and thankfully all with the human element all's well that ends well. But whatever went wrong with the bend in the meantime, it wasn't satisfactory all weekend for the Curragh, and it did have a bearing on a lot of results on the round track over the weekend. Leaders getting maybe 2 lengths off the bend if they railed anyway well in comparison to horses that were held up, and obviously Aidan with his 3 pace setters, pacemakers, relay pacemakers went off, and they elected to swing off the bend and open up a gap. And I don't think anything in behind Los Angeles was impeded by the run at all. They had the whole length of the straight to get organised. So tactics wise, if it was in France where the rules are a lot more stringent and what a pacemaker can do, I don't think there was any issue there anyway.
And Matt, Aidan O'Brien said afterwards that Ryan Moore said, look, this Los Angeles, he's too good for a St. Ledger. What do you think?
I think he's precisely a St. Ledger type of horse. I'm not sure where exactly they're going to be looking to go from this, but I don't think it's necessarily an outstanding piece of form. Interesting hearing Fran there. I mean, You had to laugh, didn't you? The Brits took 3 horses over, and 2 of them kind of roughed each other up from a couple of furlongs out, and you just sort of head in hands really for those 2 of Oisin and James Doyle getting a little bit of a barging match. You had to feel a little bit sorry for Matt Surrey, and full credit to Connections for pitching him into that. I'd actually take a more positive view about Ambiente Friendly still. I know on the face of it here, on the figures, he's taken a small backward step from Epsom. I think he needs a break now, doesn't he? I mean, they had to go for the derbies after what happened at Lingfield. But credit to James Fanshawe all along. He kept saying, you know, at the back of his mind, 12 furlongs might stretch this horse. And I think it did. His class got him pretty close, and he ran a hell of a race at Epsom. This just looked a little bit too much for him. But the way that he travelled there and at the Curragh marks him out as a really smart horse. I'm not saying he's going to be like a white birch, but we know that can happen. Horses that, you know, next year dropping back to 10 furlongs, maybe even towards the end of this season. And if he does get 12, it could be in a race like the Breeders' Cup Turf. But I'd be taking a positive view on him. And Los Angeles, just one of those horses of Aiden's that has progressed with each run, and hard to know where he ends up. I still think he's more of a stayer than a classy sort of Group 1 mile-and-a-half horse. But I take the point.
I'd be really interested to find out whether a Ballydoyle horse who wins the Guineas and Derby is too good for a St. Ledger with a nice £2 million bonus for the Triple Crown next year.
Yeah, I think he'd be the ideal type for a St. Ledger, wouldn't he? You just mentioned Oisin Murphy there, Matt, and I have spoken to Oisin for his regular podcast segments. He talks about Sunway and his second in the Irish Derby and plenty of other things as well. So here he is. Thank you, Oisin Murphy, for joining us once again on the Sporting Life Racing podcast. How's it going? Are you in good form?
I'm in great form, Ben. Yeah, I've been riding out this morning at Andrew Boulding's, and I have a quiet day today, a free afternoon before Epsom, where I have 2 spins tonight.
And you're clear fresh on the back of finishing second in the Dubai Duty Free Irish Derby, and you predicted a career best from Sunway, and that's definitely what you got after a great run.
Yeah, I'm delighted with him. It's a shame not to go one place better and win the race, but he felt excellent last Tuesday morning, and I hope your listeners were able to get some money on each way, because he was a good second, and it was great to see him run so well.
Would you be up for a rematch with Los Angeles on the back of Sunday?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Ballydoyle team got the tactics spot on. It was run at a nice even tempo. We actually quickened in the straight, so they didn't go too fast. They just went an even gallop, and Los Angeles had a ground-saving trip into the straight, and Ryan was very strong on him in the finish.
And you were strong at the finish as well. Going forward, do you think he's a horse that could get further, maybe a St. Ledger horse?
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of being discussed at the moment. The St. Ledger, maybe the King George en route to the St. Ledger, the ARC trials. There are lots of options for him, but certainly if he were to go down the Ledger route, I'd be confident he would stay.
Okay. It's interesting the King George is in the mix.
Yeah, he's kind of the right makeup a horse. I think fast ground, or the likelihood of fast ground and a decent tempo over a mile and a half would suit him quite well.
Okay, just reflecting on another horse you won on last week, New Century, I thought was interesting. Obviously a son of Kamako, trained by Andrew Baldwin. He looks a lovely prospect.
Yeah, he's a gorgeous horse. He ran very well on debut over an inadequate distance, and he was back in the trip, but he did everything right at Doncaster, and I think the race will work out well. He wasn't overtrained, and hopefully he'll improve again for his next race. Andrew and Sheikh Fahd both mentioned the Salario. Kamako actually got beat in the Salario, not due to a lack of ability, but he was a bit babyish. And hopefully this horse will have learnt enough at Doncaster to go there and go very well.
And he's got a lovely middle distance pedigree, hasn't he, on his dam side? So you just think the more he steps up as he gets older, that's gonna suit him.
Yeah, he's a half to Passion and Glory, who I obviously won a Group 3 on over a mile and a half. So he's definitely going to get a mile. He'll probably go a mile this year, but let's see what he can do at Sandown first.
Okay, we're looking ahead to the weekend as well on the podcast, Oisin, and you are riding at Haydock this Saturday. And Queen of the Pride in the Lancashire Oaks, a Group 2. It looks a perfect next step after her Group 3 win at the track last time out.
Yeah, a little bit of a stressful time early in the week with her entry going in, and I'd been booked to ride Dancing Gemini in the Coral-Eclipse. But she's a roaring lion out of Simple Verse, who won a Group 3 the last day. So I couldn't not go and ride her, and I think she's second in the betting. So Mark Prescott's filly Tiffany is jocked up with Luke Morris, so it appears like she's a likely runner. And I thought she deserved to be favoured. Thought she was good at Newcastle. Queen of the Pride, I sat on her on Saturday morning, and she felt in good shape. We didn't overdo anything, but I think she's an improving filly. Who, if there was some rain, I think a little bit of juice in the ground would be ideal for her. So hopefully she's one that, after this can step up again.
And it looks like you're going to be on Wild Waves as well, a progressive son of Crystal Ocean in the 1 6 handicap on the same card.
Yeah, he was an expensive yearling. He was 135 grand, I think, as a yearling, but you can see why. He's the most beautiful model, and it's all coming together for him. He stays well, but this is a very competitive race, and I hope he'll be bang there in the mix. I think he's progressing each week, and from what I saw of him this morning, he's in good shape.
And we don't know if you're on Relentless Voyager yet in the Old Newton Cup, but he's a horse I love, so I'm going to ask you about him anyway, Oisin. It'd be a really tough task, wouldn't it, off 108 in a handicap like this, but he's such a nice horse.
Yeah, and he did nothing wrong at York. Ryan went slow in front, and it turned into a bit of a sprint, and he made ground the whole way up the straight. Haydock won't pose a problem for him. Ground is fine for him. A little bit of juice or a little bit quick will be fine. Yeah, I really like him, and I hope, after Saturday, if he does run and he wins, I hope we can see him up into stakes level.
Okay, Shane. Finally, I'm going to ask you about the Coral-Eclipse. It sounds like you were nearly riding in the race, but it's a fantastic race. Obviously, you've ridden in the Derby and against Derby horses again at the weekend. Just how do you rate City of Troy's chances going into a race like this against his elders?
Well, I think he deserves to be favoured. I thought he was strong at the line at Epsom. Obviously, he's coming back to 10 furlongs. They're going to want a good, even tempo. So I'd imagine one of the other Ballydoyle horses will run in order to create that tempo, because, looking through the field, there isn't a natural front runner. I thought maybe one of the outsiders to look at from a place perspective would be Ghostwriter. I thought he was very good last year as a 2-year-old. I think he did nothing wrong in the Guineas. I don't know why he didn't run better in France. I know he was a little bit tight for room, but I thought he could win the Prix de Jockey Club. For me, Ghostwriter is definitely under the radar. City of Troy going right-handed. We know he lugged a little bit out to his right at Epsom. So, I don't think Ryan will want to be drawn one. But he's the class horse and the most likely winner.
Yeah, it can be a tactical race, can't it? The Coral-Eclipse, if you get a small field, and obviously City of Troy's dropping back from 1.5 miles. Just what will Ryan Moore be thinking going into the race?
I think he'll just be thinking, because they will have a pace horse in there, follow around and keep it smooth, and he knows he stays further. So, from 3 down, I'd imagine Ryan will be going through the gears.
Great stuff. Well, thanks a lot as always, Oisin, and good luck this weekend.
Thanks very much, Ben.
This is Sporting Life.
Thanks very much, as always, to Oisin there. Some interesting thoughts on the Irish Derby, etc. GC, he was pleased with Some Waves running in second. Thinks he might be a Ledger horse, but connections are thinking of taking in the King George first.
They are, yeah. I want to touch on a couple of things. Shall we touch on the King George? First of all, let me go round the table here. Say, would anyone wasn't shocked, but I was a little bit surprised to hear Aidan suggesting that the King George is the next target for Auguste Rodin. I didn't really think that would be on the table after what happened there last year. Was anyone else surprised about that call?
Yeah, I was slightly surprised, but I suppose the fact that he redeemed himself at Ascot last week, maybe they've decided to park that poor performance in the King George last year. But yes, I didn't think he'd go there again this year, GC.
Just looking at the betting, 7-4 Auguste Rodin, if he's going, I get it. 8 City of Troy, he's not going to be there. 8 Luxembourg, not sure. 10 Blue Stocking, Rafe Beckett said you'd think the Nassau is the place to go. We'll come to her in a moment. Los Angeles, unlikely, I think, to go to the King George, 10-1. Passenger, I don't know what the situation with him at the moment is. I wouldn't be surprised if Continuous was on the King George trail. But I saw Nick Luck chatting to Charlie Appleby at the weekend, and he gave a broad hint that Rebels Romance is King George bound. And if that's the case, that horse is not going to be jumping off at 12-1 with his CV. So I think that's quite an interesting anti-post market, the King George. That French horse, Calandagan, would have been live, but his connections have said that he's not coming, that he might come for the Champion Stakes. But 7-4 Auguste Rodin, and perhaps a bit of value with Rebels Romance at 12-1.
Any prices on Sunway in the King George?
Didn't see it. I don't think bookies have latched onto your strong news line about him. So he'd probably be more like a 16 or 20-1 chance, but he ran a blinder at the weekend.
He did. Fran, what did you make of the placed horses? Who would you take out of the Irish Derby going forward?
I think you'd only have to take Matsuri, really, given his lack of experience and the way the race panned out for him as well. Obviously, with Sunway ranging down his outside as James Doyle tried to get out, he was intimidated. Oisin rightly holding his line, good jockeyship, but Matsuri never really got a good run at the race. And given he's gone from winning a novice at Leicester over 10 furlongs up to 1.5 miles, he can only improve, one would think, on the back of that. He never really got to get into full flow at all by any means. And he's the one that you would take out with more upside on his bare form. Sunway, David Menuisier, Guinea's French Derby, no look, placed in the Irish Derby. You know, I've the highest regard for him from the time I rode for him, but when he gets to goods, he puts him in the ballpark to strike. He's just not getting the rub of the green at present with the big race wins.
Can I come on out of that and onto Ben asked me for 3 things that I enjoyed from the Curragh and 1 maybe negative. Shall I rattle through those now, Ben?
Yeah, go for it.
He's on top, the chippy, I call him, David Menuisier. Menuisier is carpenter in French, as you all know, the chippy. Have a look at his record this year. Sunway, 16-1, second in the Irish Derby. Hats off for that. Tamfana cost €20,000. Unlucky 4th in the English 1,000 guineas. Close 3rd in the Group 1 Prix de Diane. And War Chimes cost €62,000, 50-1 3rd in the Oaks. So he's having a go. And to have 3 different horses placed in classics, that's a real feather in his cap. The other 2 things, the Striking Viking, more on him in a moment, but I thought he went like a pretty good horse. His time form rating he achieved at the weekend, 108, would make him a big runner in either the Moulcombe or the Richmond Stakes at Goodwood. I think the Gimcrack's bound to be a major target, but Goodwood's not too far away. And interested to hear what Fran and Billy think about a filly. 2 Frankel fillies dominated what looked a good maiden on Friday night. Lake Victoria won it, bit more streetwise for Aidan O'Brien than this Gel Lions filly, a Frankel filly called Red Letter, who I thought she went like a pretty good filly. What do you think, lads?
Yeah, that was a really interesting maiden, I thought, GC. It's been an interesting maiden the last couple of years. It's thrown up good winners. Ilang won it last year, and I think we saw 2 really smart fillies there in Lake Victoria and Red Letter. I would agree with you. Lake Victoria looked through the race as if she was a bit more clued up. I did think when she came off the bridle she was a little bit lost. I think there's plenty more to come from her as well. Red Letter came from a long way back, finished well. The 2 of them pulled well clear. They didn't run to a huge rating. We gave them both a rating of 91p on time form, but both get quite big sectional upgrades. Red Letter in particular gets a huge sectional upgrade from coming from where she did. So yeah, I think there are definitely 2 group race performers in the making. 2 fillies to keep a very close eye, and they'll be winning good races before the year is out.
Agree, Fran?
I no surprise with the second at least. Anyway, Ger Lyons won the opening race with a Beckford horse called Beckman, who actually did win well in debut. And his post-race interview, I said, "What about the next 2-year-old? She's very good." And he said, I said, "Is she good as a filly? Babouche Billy, the one in Cork a fortnight ago, Jumpman filly, the one by 5 lengths." He said yes. So he said he's got a good bunch of fillies. Inexperience probably beat her in the day, but you wouldn't mind going home with either of the first or the second. I think they're right up there. And with the exception of Henri Matisse, the short running colts of Aidan O'Brien's really aren't measuring up to much. So they've got a good bunch of fillies at present. I'm sure it's better to come with the 7 furlong milers get going, but the fillies are definitely where it's at the minute.
With those 2-year-old fillies, they're both in the Mile. Is there what's the natural sort of stepping stone there, Fran? Is the one at the end of the month?
Debutant Stakes would be there. I had a Silver Flash.
Silver Flash
Stakes
would be
as well
first,
in
yeah.
Epperson, yeah. So Silver Flash, Debutant Stakes, 2 good stepping stones. You could do both, but probably ideal one and on to Irish Champions Weekend.
And my only mile negative for the weekend, and it's a question for Billy and for Fran. What about these Irish sprinters? I mean, it's a chaotic division at the moment, but the Irish were not cited in 3 Group 1 sprints at Royal Ascot, barely a runner, and that was a listed race at the weekend. My mate Alfie won it, hardy horse, but the standard of the sprinters in Ireland is really low, isn't it?
Well, I think the standard of the sprint division all round is kind of low at the moment, GC.
Oh yeah. I'm talking about the Irish ones.
We knew he'd say that.
Let's face it, though. I mean, look at the Australian mare that came and won at Ascot. I mean, she's far from the top of the tree in Australia, and yet won very well. So I just think there's a lack of depth in that division. Yes, it is quite weak over here at the moment, but I think it's just a general malaise rather than something that's specifically concentrated in Ireland.
It regressed to the mean, GC. It was only really in the last sort of 5 years they've had a real resurgence with Irish sprinters, but traditionally, kind of when I was coming through, I don't think, Irish sprinters were never that hot.
Well, when I was riding the accession, when I had Osterhazy, who was the champion Irish sprinter for a couple of years, if you got a phone call to ride an English trained sprinter in any Irish 5 or 6 furlong race, you just took it. Yeah. There was no question mark at all. You just took whatever was that was coming. And it's a weak division at the minute. You'll see the same horses pitching up for a Group 2, Group 3 list race, small pool of horses. And with the sharper 2-year-olds generally being sold early on, there's not really the incentive with the programme in Ireland to keep them on. You see a lot of ex-Irish horses picked up by the likes of the Horse Watchers or David Amara doing well as older sprinters in the UK. It's just not the done thing here to have sprinters in the longer term, I think, and that's probably a factor as well. But how good was Colin Keenan, my mate Alfie, Graham?
Yeah. Also, I wanted to mention Billy Lee in the Rockingham winner. That was a great ride. What's the name of that filly?
Amazon Lady.
Is she in foal?
She is, yes. Yeah.
All on his own on the far side and stole away with one of the biggest handicaps of the season.
Well, GC, you mentioned it briefly in your top 3 things from the Curragh, and we should talk about the Railway Stakes, because it was quite a compelling contest, wasn't it, Billy? Henri Matisse getting the better of the striking Viking, who looks at a really good 2-year-old himself for Kevin Ryan.
Yeah, I must admit, Ben, that I was very taken with Henri Matisse when he won his maiden first time out. Now, he only fell in. He won by a nose or a short head or something, but I thought he did extremely well. He looked the part on the day, and I just thought he was very green through the race and got up very, Ryan Moore forced his head in front right on the line from another very promising colt of Joseph O'Brien's called Cadogan in second. And I thought that maiden would work out really well, and it kind of hasn't. The third horse home, Red Evolution, of Michael O'Callaghan's got beaten since. The fourth has been beaten since. So it's the form of that race was disappointing me slightly. And I suppose it's been disappointing other people as well, because Henri Matisse was sent off a very big price. He was the outside of the entire field at the weekend. Obviously, Ryan Moore had chosen to ride Tunbridge Wells, who had been very impressive in a maiden a couple of weeks ago. That had a good deal to do with it. But again, Henri Matisse, like in his maiden win, he just seemed quite green. The penny only really dropped in the final furlong. He came home really powerfully. I think, if anything, he wants to go 7 furlongs already. The Phoenix Stakes is the obvious next step for him, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is a horse that ends up in the National Stakes later on in the season. He ran to a time form rating of 110p, which makes him the best 2-year-old colt to be seen so far this season. He's still behind a couple of O'Brien fillies, Bedtime Story and Fairy Godmother, but it's the best performance by a colt, and it was backed up by the time figure. He also ran to 110 time figure, which is the best time figure put up by a 2-year-old colt this year. So all in all, it looks strong form. As GC said, the Striking Viking ran a huge race in second. There's definitely a group race in him sooner rather than later. You'd imagine the Gimcrack is a very obvious one for him, being trained by Kevin Ryan. Whether they'll go to Goodwood in the meantime, he's going to take plenty of beating wherever he goes, you know. But yeah, I think the winner is probably very good. And like I said, I think 7 furlongs will see him in an even better light.
Yeah, he screams Gimcrack, doesn't he? The Striking Viking for Kevin Ryan. Matt, the Irish Derby wasn't the only Group 1 action at the Curragh over the weekend, because we had the Pretty Polly Stakes as well, with 2 British trained fillies fighting it out. Blue Stocking just getting the better of Emily Upjohn, and Kieran Schumacher, he just can't catch a break, can he?
He can't. No, I am a supporter of Schumacher in the job. I think Schumacher is a fantastic jockey. Will get his opportunities. This was the first day, though, and I know he's come out and spoken really positively and admirably on the Nick Luck podcast as well. And he says he wouldn't change a thing that he did, with another shot at it. But I think, I couldn't blame him, obviously, for Inspiral at all. Couldn't blame him for Emily, really, in the Coronation Cup. But this was maybe the first ride where I just felt as though he did something just fractionally wrong. It's tiny, but she showed such a brilliant turn of foot, didn't she, to take the lead, to pick it up. She did that last year. She did it in the Musidora. They were sort of her striking victories. Last year's Coronation Cup, the Musidora when she was 3. She has that brilliant turn of foot, and he just used it a fraction early. I don't know what the guys would think of that. There was an air of inevitability when Blue Stocking was coming. She's such an admirable mare herself. She's consistent. She's high class. We know that. I think the official ratings now have them basically on a par. And you can't really argue with that. But this definitely felt to me like one that got away from Kieran.
Yeah, Blue Stocking's improved, hasn't she, Billy? Because she had a bit of seconditis last year, but seems to have shaken that off now as an older filly.
She had, and a couple of people questioned her temperament last year once or twice. She got beaten in a listed race one day at Chester that she probably should have won. She got beaten, finished, they put cheek pieces on her after that. Obviously, she ran in cheek pieces in the Middleton at York, which she was really impressive that day. She went up to a time form rating of 120 on that occasion. And we reckon she ran to a similar figure at the Curragh. She didn't need to improve on that. I'm not saying she won't again further down the line. But yeah, she definitely just looks like a more mature filly this year. And her dam was the same. Emulous was a very good filly at 3, but she was much better at 4. And it looks like Blue Stocking is going down the same sort of route. I was interested to hear Rafe Beckett saying afterwards that maybe the Nassau Stakes was ideal for her. Certainly looking at her, to my way of thinking, would be back up to 1.5 miles. That there's even a better performance in her at that sort of trip. She was really, really strong at the finish. Looked to me like she got a little bit tapped for toe early in the straight when Emily Upjohn kicked on. I think the thing about Emily Upjohn is she's probably not quite the mare she was this time last year. Certainly, we have taken that view with her rating. We've cut her from 125 down to 119 plus. We're not absolutely certain she can't reproduce that level of form she was capable of last year. But, she's had 4 runs since the Eclipse last year, and she hasn't got close to that since. Yeah, the sectional times would suggest that Kieran Schumacher didn't do an awful lot wrong on the runner-up. The one thing I noticed watching the race, and Fran will have a much better idea than me because he's ridden the Coral a lot more often than I have, but I was just surprised where Kieran initially made his move. He made a lot of ground up the hill in the back straight at the Coral. She looked to be nice and settled in midfield, and he kind of made a lot of ground in the early part of the race up the hill at the Coral. I don't know whether that had a toll late on, because she did, I was a little disappointed in her final furlong. For the filly that stays 1.5 miles, she really was going nowhere in the last 100 yards. So, maybe he did use a bit of petrol early, but maybe he used it a bit earlier than some people thought. I don't know. Fran, do you have a view on that?
I think the pace was so steady when you look at the fractions, Billy. Like in the second, third, and the fourth furlong, they're doing 13 seconds, 30 in the fourth furlong of the race for Group 1 company on fast ground. It was pretty. The easy side of good ground. It was steady pace. I thought Kieran bought lengths when they're cheap. I know he's climbing the hill, but he actually didn't have to use her. The key point in the race for me, where it went wrong and told in the last 75 yards for Emily Upjohn, was when she latched onto the bridle on the downhill run to the straight. She just didn't drop her head for Kieran at that point in the race. Got racing upsides Lumiere Rock maybe sooner than ideal. And that just maybe that loss of energy from the 4 furlong marker to the 2 furlong marker, where if she just done things in a more controlled manner, it may well have seen her home. There was a point 2 furlongs out where I'd imagine connections of Blue Stocker are going, why didn't we put the cheek piece on her? She was hanging in behind, she was lugging, but once she got rolling, that stamina came into play. She's a 1.5 mile filling Group 1 company. For me, she got away at 10 furlongs on this occasion, but 9 times out of 10, either cheek piece on, 10 furlongs around Goodwood, things might happen quick for her, but she's going the right way. And Emily Upjohn, I like to ride by Schumacher in that he used his initiative. You know, he wasn't second guessing himself. It was steady pace. He went forward, but just when he needed her to drop her head and relax and downhill run to the straight from the 5 to the 3 furlong marker, she was in his hands. If she dropped her head then and been saving a bit more energy, she may well have lasted at home.
And Fran, GC, just final point on the Curragh. There's a debate going on really about the Irish Derby and if changes are needed. You know, some trainers thinking it should be dropped to 10 furlongs, others saying no, stick with tradition, stick it 1.5 miles. This is what we need. Where do you sit on it, Fran?
Do we have Ed's amount of time to go through this now for a monologue?
A nice concise version, please.
Exactly. Look, I think it should be left at 1.5 miles, but times have changed. Royal Ascot is a huge meeting now for new modern owners. They want to go to Royal Ascot, whether it's for the Queen's Vase, the King George Handicap, the Hampton Court, or the King Edward. They're huge races now. They're Group 2s, Group 3s, handicaps, but you give a new owner with money, they want to go to Royal Ascot. So I think as a consequence, the Irish Derby is in the wrong place, and I think we should really look at moving it to Irish Oaks weekend. So
I would agree.
If you fast forward on to 2025, is it next year? Yeah. July the 20th, you've got the Irish Oaks on Saturday, July the 20th, and you've the Irish Derby on July 21st. Now, there's one race that will have a little knock-on effect, is the King George at Ascot, which will be a week later. But the last 2 years, King of Steel is the only 3-year-old to have figured in the King George. It's been mainly an older horse race in recent times. It gives you 5 weeks if you move the Irish Derby to that slot. To the Juddmonte at York, it gives you obviously the extra 2 or 3 weeks beyond that to the Irish Champion Stakes, and give any horse that runs in the first 3 in either of them 4 races at Royal Ascot winning your in status for the Irish Derby. 4 weeks on from Ascot, you've got a mid-season spectacular with the 2 classics on the weekend. I think it's just in the wrong place with the way Ascot has taken over the whole priority of modern day owners and even breeders. You want to go to people with status, want to go to Royal Ascot to be seen with the Royals, to be in the mix there for that. The prize money doesn't really come into it. The race itself is in the wrong place for me. Distance, I think it should stay at 1.5 miles all day long. If it was 1.25 miles last week, City of Troy wouldn't have been there. He'd still be going to the Eclipse to put value on him because he'd be 1 to 10 for a 10 furlong Irish Derby. So that's complete waste of time.
Fran's pretty wholeheartedly with all that,
Yeah. Fran's made a really good point about certain new owners now. Wathnan, and there's a few other Middle Eastern owners who would always give the vote to Royal Ascot. My other two quick points to make in this. I agree that it probably needs to stay at 1.5 miles. The lads who are suggesting a drop back to 10 furlongs, they need to come armed with a lot of data and a lot of horses in the last, let's say, 10 years who would have been prime contenders for a 10 furlong Irish Derby. Haven't seen that cited. Which is not surprising. Kevin Blake made an interesting point about moving the Eclipse rather than moving the Irish Derby and moving it a couple of weeks down the track in the calendar. That was an interesting read. But my main point is, whatever you think about the distance and where it sits in the calendar, where would the Irish Derby be, the Dubai duty-free Irish Derby be, without the Coolmore support? It's been absolutely propped up by that one operation for a decade or more now. And it strikes me that even major yards, Godolphin, Gosden, Beckett, Weld, lots of others, they just cannot seem to access the right pedigrees to produce Derby horses. If you haven't got what were the Galileos, what are now the Frankels, Justifies, and maybe Camelots, etc., you are going to struggle to produce Derby colts. So accessing the right pedigrees is key to finding 1.5 mile classic colts and what one operation is carrying the entire load at the moment.
And that operation carries a lot of clout in Ireland, so they're
Yes.
going to keep producing these Derby horses. So they certainly don't want the race dropped to a mile and a quarter.
No.
And while that happens, I don't think it's not going to change distance. I don't think.
Well, it would be folly from a European pattern point of view, Billy, to have an Irish Derby 1 week at 2,000 meters and a Coral-Eclipse 6 days later.
Absolutely.
It's just perverse.
I totally agree with Fran. I think the race itself needs to be moved. I would move it to Irish Oaks weekend as well.
Okay, that is the Curragh done and dusted, and we're just going to quickly reflect on Newcastle before we get into the Coral-Eclipse this weekend. And Billy, I'll come to you first for the Alphonse Legrand controversy. I'll try and sum this up as best as I can in a concise manner. Tony Martin banned for 3 months for breaking anti-doping rules in Ireland. His horse from the spring that he won a couple of races with, Alphonse Legrand, now running in his sister's name, Cathy O'Leary. He wins the Northumberland Vase. Tony Martin's seen celebrating, leading the horse in on ITV. Holly Doyle mentions his riding instructions in a winning interview. What do you think? How do you sum it all up?
Well, what exactly is he banned from, Ben? I mean, he's clearly the figurehead of that operation at the same time. Like, if he's banned, why is he on the racecourse in the first place? That's my question. Look, this is an ongoing issue over here in Ireland. Tony Martin actually didn't get, initially, when that hearing was heard, he didn't get any ban. He got I think a 2-year suspended sentence. It was then appealed, and on the appeal, they seemed to come up with some sort of a deal where he got a 3-month, his license was taken away for 3 months. Look, we've seen this time and time again in Ireland in recent years. Charles Byrne's license was taken off him. The horses were trained by Cahill, his son. Dennis Hogan lost his license for a bit. All those horses were straight back in his yard. And we have the kind of ludicrous situation coming up now where Luke Homer's going to lose his license, I think, for 3 years. But Luke Homer doesn't really train those horses because he doesn't live in Ireland. So absolutely nothing is going to change in that yard. They will just be trained by the current assistant trainer, which has been the case in the last couple of years anyway. So I just don't see what the point of these bans are. Like, if you're going to be banned, yes, you can still be on the racecourse and you can still be in the winner's enclosure and you can clearly still give instructions to the jockey. What's the point of giving you a ban? I just think it's farcical, really, Ben.
Yeah, GC, Lee Mottershead in the Racing Post summed it up with crass optics, and that's about it.
Yeah, good on Lee. This sport is undefeated. It is the best at producing really funny stories. And I maybe it's just me. I read the words and I laugh out loud. And the go-to man is David Jennings now. If you sit on a dead horse or something like this happens, it's a safe media space to put it out there, to set the record straight. And look at the quotes. Tony Martin, I didn't distance myself from the celebrations. Tony, you were on the podium with your hand on the trophy and you're at the other arm round Holly Doyle. But this is the best of all. I didn't distance myself from the celebrations. One quote came to mind, and at a political time, ambushed with a cake. Boris Johnson. Do you remember that one? It's just hilarious. And DJ, who's a Palaman, it caused widespread fury within the industry. No, it didn't. Most of the people in the industry are laughing and saying, on you, Tony, you serve it up to him. Go on, son. There was no fury. It's hilarity. It's a very funny story. And as Billy said, under the rules, he wasn't banned from being there. So either ban the fella from being there or don't. It's a bit of a paper tiger at the moment, the whole rule.
And Matt, moving on to the feature race at Newcastle on Saturday, the Northumberland Plate, won by One Smooth Operator. You spoke to Brian Ellison earlier in the season, didn't you, about his ambition to finally win this race?
I did, yeah. He gave me an ex Michael Stout horse that he'd got hold of that hasn't been seen since. But no, he did also mention One Smooth Operator. The interesting thing he said about that horse, and I think he reiterated again at the weekend, was that he would basically only run it if he thought the track was riding suitably quick. He says he was saying that he and his jockeys were sort of often say that the course there at Newcastle, obviously the all-weather track, rides very differently on certain days. Now, obviously they were calling it standard to slow. But he wanted quick ground. And he said it. Yeah, it was perfect for the horse. He was bouncing off it. So I wouldn't know, having not ridden there, obviously myself. But yeah, he absolutely bolted up, didn't he? He won very impressively. Another horse, just to mention from Newcastle before we move on. I thought that Wiltshire was really impressive. He won the handicap that started the card on Saturday. He's gone up now from 95 to 101. Expect to see him in a major sprint handicap near you sometime soon. Stewards Cups and Air Gold Cups. And I was almost thinking, would it be outlandish to suggest that he might end up in the Champions Sprint at Ascot in autumn? He's that sort of horse. He's very lightly raced. Obviously,
Montasib
likes a bit of cut.
Montasib's heading in that Champions Sprint direction as well, Matt, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. Yeah, this is a lightly raced one. This Wiltshire was from the Meads that Pegasus got hold of.
Well done to Brian Ellison. The racing media have lost one of their key threads and quotes now. On plate day, always say Brian Ellison's always wanted to win this and he was born on plate day. No longer will we be able to say that. And after tomorrow, Sakia Starmer won't be able to say my father was a toolmaker anymore.
And that sums up the weekend review quite nicely. And we will move on now to looking ahead to the Coral-Eclipse at Sandown on Saturday, because we're all set for a fantastic renewal of the race. Fran, City of Troy back in action a month on from Epsom. He's prohibitively priced up at 4-9, or is he?
I suppose on the back of that win at Epsom, and he's a 3-year-old getting the weight for age allowance on Saturday, and given that he looks well back on par in comparison to his juvenile form last year, you can see why he is short in the market, Ben. And particularly with a little bit of a niggle or doubt about White Birch's participation. Obviously, it's Wednesday morning, we're recording, and there is talk that he's got to do a bit of work. He's got to get scoped because he's got to get his bloods done before the participation is confirmed with White Birch, who's been sensational this season. He's got better and better. He's grown up a lot as a horse, as an individual. He's behaving really well pre-race, and he was very, very, very good in the Tattersalls Gold Cup, where he probably benefited more than Augusta Rodan from the 2 hours of raid that we had pre the Tattersalls Gold Cup. But he has shown, albeit at 1.5 miles, that he can go on fast ground for White Birch. But the stable, about 3 winners this year from 6 runners. He's ran 3 times and had 3 other runners. So I'm not quite sure what with the overall health of the whole team, or many, because they do have quite a number of horses in training, the Murphy team. So if they're a little bit worried about scopes and bloods today and not confirming it, I can see why City tries so short in the betting, given he's the biggest danger at this point in time.
It'd be a big letdown if White Birch doesn't run for the races at all.
Yeah, hopefully he does, GC. I mean, we've seen Derby winners obviously go and win the Eclipse before, but we've seen them being beaten as well. It's just great to see a winner from Epsom line up in the Eclipse, though.
It is. And watching the race again this morning, the most fascinating aspect was when Ryan put his whip down, probably just over 100 meters out, and he powered on that horse. And once again, he was hard to pull up. So, you know, I'm not in any rush to oppose him. It is worth noting there's only £1 between them on time form ratings, but City of Troy hasn't had a chance to dip his toe in the older horse waters. But I think a White Birch City of Troy Eclipse is a very easy sell. A City of Troy against the rest without White Birch is nothing like so seductive. So fingers crossed that that White Birch does make it, because how about that to put on your stallion advertisements down the track, taking down Auguste Rodin in May and then taking down City of Troy in July. That would be a cocky headline, wouldn't it?
Billy, what do you make of it? Do you just say White Birch does get there and lines up at Sandown? How dangerous an opponent is he to City of Troy?
Well, he's a major player, Ben. There's no doubt about it. Fran touched on it there. He's a much improved horse this year. I think mentally he seems to be a much more mature horse, and it's coming out in his performances. And look, he was deeply impressive at the Coral the last day in the Tats Gold Cup. Yes, the ground might have come right for him, but still, the way he picked up and went past Auguste Rodin was really, really impressive. He's had 5 runs at 1.25 miles, Ben. He's won 4 of them. The only day he got beaten, he just got touched off in the Dante on very quick ground. That's the only time he's been beaten at 1.25 miles. He's a really progressive horse. He sets a good standard here, but because, you know, White City of Troy himself, he is a pound higher on time form ratings on the adjusted ratings. He does have a P in his rating, which White Birch doesn't. And just looking at the Eclipse in recent years, the last 9 winners of the Eclipse, 6 of them were 3-year-olds. So, okay, not many Derby winners have won it in recent years, but 3-year-olds do have a very good record in recent years. So, yes, hopefully White Birch runs. If he does run, he's really going to put it up to City of Troy, and we'll see what City of Troy is made of. But all things being equal, it looks as if City of Troy is going to take an awful lot of beating here, I think.
And Matt, there's some other 3-year-olds potentially in the race, Dancing Gemini, Ghostwriter. Are either of these capable of improving to have a say in the finish?
Well, that's the thing. It's all about the improvement, isn't it? They shouldn't be good enough. They don't look good enough. Both really nice 2-year-olds. They just haven't done enough yet this time around as 3-year-olds. Ghostwriter's the one that I would still just hold a little bit of a torch for. I just liked the run in the Guineas. Now, obviously, on the back of that, it was too tight, wasn't it? I think in an ideal world, or maybe with hindsight, the benefit of hindsight, a race like the Dante Stakes would have been a perfect comeback trial for him, but they stated quite early on they didn't want to go for the Derby, so it made no real sense. So they had to go Guineas. Looking at his pedigree as well, they had to have a shot at that mile Group 1, and then he's ended up in the French Derby, the Prix de Jockey Club, and on the face of it, he had a good draw, but he had some real soft conditions to encounter that day at Chantilly. It didn't work out for him. He didn't look good enough, but it was still another solid run that sort of gave me a little bit of hope that there's a proper horse there. Now things are going to have to drop into place, and like you say, he'll have to improve 10 pounds to even be competitive. But he's the one that I think might have that bit of potential to bridge a gap with a horse like City of Troy, but he doesn't look up to that standard.
Billy and Fran, Joseph O'Brien team keep campaigning Al Ritha like he's a real good horse, don't they?
Yeah.
What do you make of him?
I'll let you answer that one, Fran.
Yeah, look, we don't see a lot of him in Ireland, obviously, Graham, and he missed time last year. That run behind Ace Impact, worried to get back to that kind of form, would leave him banged there as well. I was actually told over the weekend that when he ran at Saratoga, he was very coltish in the mornings and not fully on his game from somebody who was on the ground. And look, he probably wasn't suited by 9.5 furlongs on an American track as well, only beaten 3.5 lengths. Interesting contender if he put his A game forward, but would it back him? Probably not. Probably not. And one thing about City of Troy, it was only pointed out to me by a couple of race watchers subsequent to the Derby. He hung quite bad to his right inside the final furlong, whether that was a loose horse but right with the camber was almost, keeping him on a level, but he may well have been distracted by the loose horse. But just interested to see how he goes on Saturday off the bridle as well.
There must be a chance Al Riffa's coming because Dylan's not made himself available, has he, Fran? Obviously, they've gone for Kieran Schumacher's on Dancing Gemini.
Yeah, and look, he's got a partnership of owners. They're obviously trying to make him a stallion as well. He's by Wootton Bassett as well. Where else is he going to go with him? I suppose going to conceivably cut up quite a bit numbers wise this race. So it looks an opportunity for him maybe to put himself in the shop window of Irish and British breeders, if you like, more so than French breeders and American breeders, where we've only seen him in recent times.
He won a Group 2, or he won a Group 1 as a 2-year-old, Ben, but it wasn't a strong one, and all the evidence since would suggest that he's a little bit short at this level. I couldn't see him playing more than a minor role here if he does come at the weekend. And
when you think about these big races, you often think about what's missing that could be here. That horse, Charlie Appleby's taking a very US-centric view of things this summer. That horse, Measured Time, who won the big race at Saratoga that Al Riffa was 5th or 6th in, he would stack up very well for a place this weekend, but he's not here because Appleby's clearly concentrating on a lot of these big American turf prizes.
And Passenger as well, obviously, just not through choice, is it?
How many runners do we think will be at the weekend? I mean, it's going to cut up quite a bit, this race, isn't it?
JRB is still in the balance, isn't it? We don't really know. I know he's jocked up. There was said after Royal Ascot, but he's another 3-year-old going the right way.
Yeah, and they're talking like Stay Alert, I see, is still jocked up. She was disappointing at the Coral at the weekend, but they were blaming that on the ground. Whether they'll turn her out again so quickly, I don't know. But like Aidan has 4 in the race, he's not going to run more than 2, I'd imagine.
I suspect Andrew Balding will run See the Fire, who's got a mountain to climb on form. But don't forget, There's a bit of Derby giant killing in the
That's
blood
right. Yeah,
with her because is her damn Arabian Queen
that's right. Yeah.
took down Golden Horn in
Oh.
the international at York, but it's a right speculator, obviously.
She is a speculator, but I do think she's gagging to step up in trip, isn't she, from a mile? So
Yeah, with that pedigree, yeah.
yeah. All eyes on City of Troy in the Coral-Eclipse. Looking forward to seeing him this weekend. Time has almost beaten us, gents, but I'll just go around the panel in case anyone has any weekend fancies. No worries if you don't, if it's a bit early, but GC, hey Doc, around the corner from you, got your eye on anything this weekend?
I've had a look at the Lancashire Oaks. It's a lot of fillies who look extremely tightly matched. I've had a look at brief look at the Old Newton Cup. It looks tough. I'm looking forward to seeing this Coral Charge at Sandown. And I can't say the bookies have missed him at the moment, but that Desperate Hero was desperately impressive for Hamilton, wasn't he? I know it was just a handicap off a mark of 91, but he absolutely sluiced up, and he has to be an improver in the race.
He did indeed. Anyone else with any weekend fancies?
And Scoop, the one that stood out for me was this Ellin. I know a few people had the fingers burnt at Royal Ascot. She was very well back, wasn't she, for the Kensington Palace? Ed
Bethel, Philly.
Yeah, Ed Bethel's.
Yeah, I liked her.
You mentioned her.
She ran well as well, didn't she?
She ran a belter, and she's in a handicap at Beverley, running off the same mark, 83. I think there's probably a fair bit of juice in that price, in that mark, sorry, given that form at Redcar worked out quite well, and she was pretty well talked up ahead of Royal Ascot as well. I quite like Puro Sangue in that Coral Charge that GC has mentioned, and Chillingham want to mention, I think, at Haydock. He's in the Old Newton Cup. I think he's, like a few of them, he won't be alone. He's being geared towards a Sky Bet Ebor, but on a mark of sort of in the high 90s, he might have to go well at Haydock if he's going to get into the big race at York. So yeah, I think he can win off his current mark, Chillingham.
I certainly don't have a strong view on the Newton Cup, Ben, but I did think Epic Poet was a big eye catcher at Ascot. I don't know if he'll be turned out again so quickly, but he'd certainly have a chance if he did turn out.
Isn't it?
That's him, yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you, gents. A few to ponder.
Ben, sorry, we just cut over you. Got to skip this weekend. Irish Oaks, 3 weeks' time.
Those fancy. Here we go.
I was done after the Irish Derby on Sunday duties, and I went to the bar, had a couple of beers with a few friends. But Ruby was
free beers. Did you have to pay for them?
The house?
I did, unfortunately. Yeah. and my wife and a few friends were there to buy a bottle of champagne or two as well. So there you go. But that's all part of Derby days. You know, Billy, as you know, as
Philly coming in.
Yes, and Ruby Walsh has done racing TV. He galloped out, put on a pair of boots. He was like John Franken with a shirt and tie and him riding work. James Doyle rode a filly called Loop de Lilies, trained by Willie Mullins, who won and have bought. And outside of Azalea, she's the best filly I've seen on the track this year in Ireland. And they bought her in the back of a maiden win at Leopardstown. She goes for the Irish Oaks. What's
she called, Fran?
Lupe de Lilis.
Lilas,
excuse me.
By Luke de Vega.
By Luke de Vega. She was ultra impressive when winning 1.5 mile maiden at Leopardstown. Whatnan Racing have bought her subsequent to that. James Doyle rode her work on Sunday. What I didn't go around the front of the stand to see her, but my 3 companions did. Were all keen to back her in the back of the work, and she's currently 7-1. I backed her a few weeks ago after she won her maiden for the race, and I wouldn't put anyone off from what I'm told the work was, but I was busy drinking in the bar, so I didn't actually see it. So
lovely.
So Whatnan have bought her, have they?
Yeah.
She's still registered as Mrs. J.M. Mullins on the Racing Post site.
Maybe the money hasn't come through yet.
Wow.
We'll wait for that check to clear, but we'll keep an eye out for that one, Fran. Thank you. Nice anti-post bet to finish with. Lope de Lilis in the Irish Oaks. Thank you to Fran, GC, Billy and Matt. Hope you enjoyed listening. We'll be back again next week to chat all things July Festival.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion and tips.